So first up, we've got Seb Fox, who's going to talk about automation to wrap, and this is a live demo. I'm clicking through, and if I press pause, look, it looks like it's working. Is it working on the live stream, Taz? It is. I'm going to turn my microphone off, and we're going to listen to Seb Fox talk about his view of wrap.
Hi, my name's Sebastian Fox. I'm the Deputy Head of Public Health Data Science at the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk about wrap. Specifically, I'm going to talk about from automation to wrap, which is a topic I'm quite passionate about. So if I just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. So I've got two simple aims for this talk. I'm going to highlight issues around automation, and I'm going to introduce some simple concepts that wrap provides. This talk is aimed at both senior leaders and analysts who are new to this. So basically, a lot of the concepts I'm going to describe here require skills and technologies that are beyond normal analyst capabilities, which is why I say senior leaders, so they can help direct their organization towards thinking about introducing those skills and technologies. And for analysts, I'm hoping that you'll see ideas that you may immediately be able to introduce into your work to help make it more robust. Okay, I'll give a demo. So I thought, how am I going to explain this? How do I demonstrate the difference between automation and wrap? So what I decided to do was I found a bit of analysis that I did about 5 years ago, which at the time I could have opened. This is an R script on the left. I could have opened it and run it, and it would have worked. So I don't know if it would have worked if I'd have given it to somebody else to run. It probably wouldn't. And it certainly doesn't work for me now. If I show you this, if I highlight it and run it, you will see that I get lots of errors. So I'll show you what the analysis is producing just to give you a flavor. Essentially, it's a map of England and London as an inset. Each little chart is an upper tier local authority. Each coloured dot represents value per year for this indicator of public health, mortality rate from causes considered preventable. And the colour of the dot depends on whether that local authority was better, similar or worse than the national average. At the time, I was just experimenting to see if I could make this. Okay. Here's the code that produced that. I'll just quickly walk you through it. So there's a couple of grids. There's a grid for London local authorities and the local authorities outside of London. There's some code that gets in the data from Fingertips, which is an OHID tool that presents public health indicators. And then I ingest some shape files from URLs pointing towards the ONS Open Geography portal. Essentially, I do a little bit of data manipulation here, and then I plot the maps, and I combine them, and then I save them as a PNG. That's essentially the process. So why doesn't it work now? I will tell you a few reasons, or why it wouldn't work for an analyst at the same time. So I might have a different version of R compared to when I wrote this 5 years ago, or the analyst might have a different version of R to what I had at the time, which means that some of the underpinning functionality of R might be slightly different for us and might cause breaking of my code. Equally, the versions of the packages that I use in the analysis might have changed over time, or say that could cause breakages too. The URLs that I'm pointing to, they may not exist anymore. the data that I'm using, it might have a different structure now compared to what it used to. So these are all things that can change over time or between people. So the point of that's what automation is. So the point is, how can we use reproducible analytical pipelines to make this more robust between analysts at the same time, or people, or yourself, or analysts in the future? And that's what I'm going to cover now. I'm going to walk you through this project, which I've called Reproducible After. It does exactly the same thing as what I showed you before. And I'm going to talk you through some of the concepts that you can see here, just to make it a bit clearer what RAP is. So I'll start with the file structure. This is just the file structure. These are folders and these are files. The file structure follows a fairly standard format. Essentially, this means that analysts or people that are unfamiliar with your project can approach the project, look at how it's structured, and know exactly where to go to find what they need to. So it's a standard project structure. The project is stored on GitHub, which is a code sharing platform, and it's publicly available. Anyone can access this. You can see the changes that I've made over time, and you can see all the files in the project here. In this project, it has a README file on the home page. This explains the goal of the project, or the repository. It tells you how you can set it up on your own machine. It tells you how to recreate the environment that the analysis was originally done in, which I'll come on to in a bit. And then it tells you it explains the structure of the repository to help you navigate through it if you wanted to. So this is the analysis code. You can see here each part of the code is documented, so people unfamiliar with the project can see what this specific bit of code is meant to do. The code is written using a style guide. So there's a well-known one called the Tidyverse style guide, and essentially the concept is that if analysts all use a same or similar style guide, it means you'll be able to read each other's code a lot more easily, and therefore it's a lot less brain compute time to try and understand and pick up somebody else's code. And then the final small part about this is I mentioned how versions of R and versions of packages can change over time. So this project uses something called RN, which is an R package, which essentially automates the recording of the version of R you're using and the version of all the packages you're using within the project. What this does, it creates a few kind of files and folders within your project automatically. And so when somebody else opens your project, it will allow them to just run a command which says, I want to use the version of packages and the version of R that they used when they did this analysis. And therefore you can discount any worries about those being the issues if you can't reproduce their analysis. So you can see here I did this in R version 4.1.3, and this is the list of packages that I've used, and this is how they're installed. And R will use this to reinstall them on other people's environments. Finally, because of some of the complexities around the project, I created a bespoke package called England Facets. And I wanted to do that to demonstrate a few other concepts. So England Facets is also stored on GitHub and is public. It's got a README, just like the other GitHub repo did. It tells you how to install it, and it gives you an example of how to use the package. The great thing about packages is that they come with documentation. So I could England Facets UTLA plot as a function from the package. And here it shows you how to use the function, what the data what the inputs are and a bit of an explanation of what you need to give them and a description of what the function does. The package I've written also gives you London shape, some data, and these data are described as well. So London shape is a shapefile of low resolution boundary for London 2021 from the ONS Geography portal. And these are all the fields you get within it. So it explains what you're getting. So you've got the documentation there within the package. So you don't have to look for a separate SOP written by someone stored in a Word file that explains how to do this and that. Each package also has tests written for them, and these tests are written to ensure that what you get, when you've written the package, you create some tests to say, I expect this to come out like this. So you're testing against your expectations. Here, for example, I've got this England ship. Well, actually, I just showed you the London ship file object, which I'm testing that it has the same attributes as they did when I first created the package. These tests, basically, I've brought a few very, very simple menial tests, which don't really show much, but they are tests. I can run these tests manually as I develop the package, which I do, but there's something called continuous integration, which I want to introduce you to, which essentially what it does, it compiles your package on a server somewhere else, runs all the tests, runs a load of checks on your package to ensure it can be built on different operating systems, as you can see here. And it just does that kind of away from you, so you don't have to think about it. All you have to do is tell it when it does it. So it can do it when you create changes to your repository, or you can tell it to do it every minute, every hour, every day, every month, that kind of thing. And then if there are any errors with it, it will email you as the package maintainer telling you there are some new issues introduced. And they could be that you've added codes that's caused a knock-on effect to damage one of your other functions, or it could be that a package that you depend on has changed in such a way that it breaks what you're trying to do. Here on the README file, you've got a couple of badges. This one says that the checks are currently passing, so those continuous integration checks that are being performed are passing. This one says that over a certain percentage of the lines of code that you've written are being tested by the tests that are in this check process. So this gives users confidence that your package is well maintained and looked after and is working. Okay, so I think that's all I really wanted to say. I'll just summarize what I've talked about. I've talked about standard folder structures. I've talked about coding in the open. I've talked about documenting code to help people understand what you're doing. I've also talked about documenting functions within packages to help people understand how to use your packages and that they're all in the same place. I've talked about standard coding styles. I've talked about controlling the environment that you do your analysis in. I talked about unit testing and also continuous integration. I think the final thing I want to say is that you can go into different levels of complexity for all of these things for RAP. There are probably even things that I haven't covered in this talk for RAP. And you should take a risk-based approach really on how deep you go. So the more critical your output, the more complex you should make your RAP process. Thank you very much for your time.
Hooray! Come on. So you can see my YouTube choice of music there. It's quite interesting. But the tech work, what we're going to do now is we're going to try and speak to Seb. So if anyone's got any questions, we'll run around with a microphone and hopefully, yes, here's Seb. Oh, before the demand for hybrid events and the interwebs, you know. So hopefully I am going to be able to see. Yeah, I heard him. Seb, are you there?
I'm here.
Great stuff. I am going to plug in.
I'm here. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Right.
Oh.
This is. I'm getting. Watch this. Right, you can see the room now. Hopefully.
I think that there's a big delay.
Oh yeah. Right. So Seb, can you see and hear me? Yes.
I can, but I think there's about a 10-second delay. I can, but I think there's about a 10-second delay.
We just heard your delay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go around the room, ask some questions, and we'll do them all at once so that we can cope with the delay, and then you can answer them all at once. And then it's like being, you're in some satellite phone in some disaster area. Okay, has anyone got any questions for Seb? We've got one there, one there, one there. We're going to take 3 questions, Seb. So I'm going to get a microphone. Name, where you from, question.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm from the strategy unit based in Midlands Lancs Commissioning Support Unit. More, I guess, an observation that what you've described as RAP feels very much just like software engineering. And are we all getting confused and trying to figure out what RAP is when a lot of what we actually want to do is already out there in the open of software engineering best practices? That's basically my comment question.
So we'll just wait for the delay and then the question.
Did you want my answer, or are we taking all the questions at the same time?
We'll take your answer and then we can cope with the delay thing. Yeah, do your answer now, Seb.
Questions at the same time. Okay. I think like that's exactly the point. I think it's confusing. No, I can. That's exactly the point. I think it's confusing. Sorry, I just heard myself, so I'm just turning my sound off for a moment and then answering. So I think the point is, yes, RAP and software engineering skills are pretty similar, and I think organizations don't really understand this at the moment necessarily. So I think the challenge is really kind of making, I think it's commonly kind of like in kind of the RAP strategy that the analysis function has produced. I think it's one of the main things that they highlight is that it's important to start creating multi-skilled teams, so teams that aren't just analysts, but also kind of data engineers, software engineers, data architects, just to do analysis. And I think the other point is about that is that the relationship between organizations and other departments such as IT and digital have changed as well. So it's important that IT and digital aren't just a service now, but you're actually kind of producing analysis together. So you're working together to do that. So I think your point is that, yes, RAP and software engineering skills are pretty similar, and it's important to work together and understand those skills as an organization, and that it's not as blurred anymore between what an analyst, it's a bit more blurred now what an analyst does and what a software engineer does.
Thanks, Seb. Very good.
Hello. I don't know if we need to tell Seb to turn his sound back on. Hi, I'm Kirsty. I'm from the National Health Service Business Services Authority. My question was just about when you said about your wraps, checking which version of R and which packages you've used. Just something we have is obviously having trouble getting all being on the same version of R and getting R updated, and obviously something like that would be very helpful. And just if you had a bit more detail about how that worked, and is that a function that's built in, or is that something I don't know about that would be really handy for us?
Okay, thanks. I understand the question. Yeah, I think so. Different organisations, as far as I understand, have different approaches to how they manage R within the organisation. And I actually really recommend on that, there's a R Studio video by Jumping Rivers. It's called R in Production, which I recommend taking a look at. But essentially, yeah, there are packages within R that you can manage versions of R packages and R. So the one that I used was Renv, which is just an off-the-shelf CRAN package. I think depending on how R is managed in your organisation, there's different ways of doing it. I think so. We've just moved from Public Health England into DHSC, and the way it's managed in DHSC is very different to Public Health England, and they use a package called Checkpoint, which essentially tells your version of R that use whatever was available at CRAN on this certain time, because otherwise, if you're like the version of R supported in DHSC is almost 2 years old now, so it's really hard to install quite new packages and up-to-date packages. So they often use that package to say, actually just use the packages that are available 2 years ago. So there's different ways of managing it, and there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution. But I do recommend trying to work with IT to help them support you to do analysis well, rather than like work against IT and like them just giving you a product and saying, yeah, there you go, it's provided, and you just trying to do patches around it to make it work for you.
Okay, I'm gonna, because we need to get through the questions and also the talks this morning. If there's any other questions, what we'll do is we'll pick up with Seb separately, maybe put them in the questions in the Google Doc that's there, and then people can share that. So the on the collaborative doc, there's a little table. If you've got any questions, please just drop them in there. So I think we should give the traditional thanks to Seb. And my relief that the technology has sort of worked is very significant. And then we'll look at the time lag on the Zoom in a second. So thanks very much, Seb. And we're going to move on. Right, so next up is Georgina, and I think if I go back to the web page, and the reason I'm using this is to show everyone that it all exists and it's all there. So if I go to Open Data Saves Lives, your slides should be on here. So if I go to Resources, so if any get one else, you can just follow my route in RAP Pipelines. That's the live stream. Look at this. It's all working. They're still loading. Okay, right. I'm just going to test something. And even the remote clicker work. The arrows.
Forwards.
Yeah.
You need a forwards.
Or maybe the down one. There you go. Over to Georgina.
Right, okay. Can you hear that all right? Yeah. So I'm Georgina Anderson. I also work at Department of Health and Social Care with Seb in the same team. So my presentation is just really an example of where we have one project where we have implemented RAP in our department. So I've got a little Wallace and Gromit video there, because I think Seb's presentation focused on the difference between automation and RAP. So I think Wallace's little inventions are very much automation and very much not RAP, because they fail frequently. So that's just my little example. So I'll just quickly talk about the background of a project that has been running for, well, it's actually 3 years, but it was kind of on hold for about a year and a half. Through COVID, we didn't really progress it, so it's kind of year and a half's work. I'll explain the problem we were trying to solve, the solution we put in place, which is a RAP process using maturely packaged R code, and then focus on some of the challenges that we faced along the way. So the background to the project was we have a data store, like a data warehouse, SQL server data warehouse within our organisation, which contains lots of record level data sets, mortality, populations, hospital admissions, and also some reference data like geographical lookups and deprivation lookups, that kind of thing. So that's our kind of starting point. And as an end point, we have a fingertips website where we publish over 1,000 public health indicators. So there are things like mortality from a specific disease group, or hospital admissions for specific diseases or specific age groups, that kind of thing. And we refresh those indicators either annually or sometimes quarterly or monthly. So there's a lot of indicators, and they're all kind of being produced following a very standard pipeline. The bit in the middle folio, that's just our database which feeds our website. So the process that I'm explaining is basically this indicator generation arrow here. So we're trying to get from our data warehouse of record level data sets to our fingertips website and all our published indicators. So I think this process is probably familiar to people. It may not be what you do now, but at some point in the past you've probably worked in this way. So this is an example of what one team might have done. So they might have written a script to produce their indicator. So there's some lines at the top which might go and get their data from the data warehouse. Then they might have a few lines of code to calculate a statistic. They might apply some disclosure control, format that output, and then maybe perform some semi-automated QA. So that's a kind of standard pipeline that we would follow for the production of nearly all the indicators that go into fingertips. So then team 2 is doing something really similar. They might be interested in maybe a different disease group or a different population. So they copy the script that team 1 had written, and they make another version so it works for them. And then team 3, team 4. And this probably is a fairly familiar situation. I stuck in team 6 there, working in Excel still. So yeah, hands up in the room if that looks fairly familiar. Lots of scripts. We've got some fairly crude version control, because you see team 2 copied team 1's script, but then when they tweaked it, they called it version 2, so we're all good. So we've got one process and done in many ways. And also we've got inconsistency of methods here. So basically, our problem is that we've lost control. We've got inconsistent methods between our teams. We've got lots of duplication of code. And we've got no robust version control. So imagine trying to find a bug in your code. What are the chances that a team that finds the bug and fixes it also communicates that to all those other teams so that bug gets fixed in all those versions of code? So the solution that we implemented was to take that same pipeline and package up each step in the process. So we've created an R package that can connect to our SQL database and draw back data. And it contains lots of functions that help our users do that. So that gives them some sort of numerator and denominator counts, basically. We've created a package that can calculate various different public health statistics. So I don't know what people in the room work with, but we work a lot with directly standardized rates, indirectly standardized rates, proportions, slope index of inequality, various different statistics. We've created a package which contains functions to apply disclosure control. So it can do rounding or it can do suppression of your data. And then we have a package that can format that output into the required format for going into our fingertips backend database. And then we have a QA package which performs some sort of basic sense checks. It compares your indicator data to what's been published previously, and looks at a trend within what you've produced. And it outputs a dashboard that can be really easily eyeballed to pick out any anomalies. So down the side here we've got little coloured boxes which represent different packages. They're all useful independently. So some people might still be producing their indicator some other way. That's fine, there may be a reason for that. But they may still be able to use some of our packages for steps in their process. But for people who are creating an indicator where the whole scope of what they need to do is covered by our packages, we have a wrapper package called the CIA tool, which basically pulls those packages. It calls functions from those packages in order to basically carry out that whole pipeline in a single line of code, or we've got a user interface so they can just click a button. So this slide is about code maturity. I've stolen it from somebody I've never met called Jamie Lundrum. Thank you, Jamie, who posted on Slack. There are various versions of this. I think I've seen a few different versions. I quite like this one. I'm going to step forward because I need to read it. So we're working from the bottom up. At the bottom, we're starting with an ad hoc script. So that's like the first sort of step in trying to create some mature code is you've written it in code, you're not working in Excel. Moving up, we then have a consistent code structure, which is something that Seb talked about. And then the use of version control, so using a collaboration platform like Git. Then the green line is about writing functions and sharing functions with other users. And then at the top, he's called this bronze, silver, and gold wrap. So this is where you're starting to make your code and your process a lot more robust. So the bronze wrap is about packaging up your code. Once your code is packaged, it's easily shared with other people and they can execute the functions you've written really easily. Then we've got unit testing, so that if you ever update your package or change any of the code within it, you can, at the click of a button, check that you haven't broken anything inadvertently. And then at the top, we've got continuous integration, which Seb talked about. So that's about automatically running those tests at regular intervals when you change anything on your Git repository. So the project I just talked about, I've just signposted on the left, I think is probably a silver wrap and working towards a gold wrap because we haven't quite fully got continuous integration working on all of the packages involved. So some of the challenges in implementing the process. The first one is user engagement. So a process like this is centralizing from like different spokes in different teams. We're centralizing the control of that code. Our users, our analysts now work with a kind of black box, and some of them don't like that. So you have to work quite hard to make sure your users know how robust that your code is by this unit testing and the continuous integration that you've got, so that they can trust the code that they're executing because they can no longer see and control what's going on. The second part is about a GUI. So we didn't want to exclude non-R users from being able to use our pipeline. But the way we built it, you had to have R software and some very basic R skills to install the packages. So we have had quite a challenge to create a GUI, mainly because the first step in our pipeline involves passing your user credentials through a package to be able to access our record level data. And that took a long time to overcome, and I think we're on our third version of a GUI interface that allows people to access our pipeline through a web link rather than having to install R on their own machine. Interoperability is the third one. So you could argue this isn't fully reproducible because we don't have control over our data warehouse at the very start, and also our endpoint. Sometimes that team will decide that something needs to be formatted differently without talking to us first. So there's definitely been some challenges about the communication between our team who manage our data warehouse and ourselves and our team at the far end who load our data into their system. And the last one is just about resource and the reallocation of resource. So it's been very difficult to talk with senior management and kind of get them to accept that by centralising this process, the workload in a central team who maintain our packages is increasing all the time, and everything that you produce does need some, even though it might be minimal, maintenance. And then the obviously workload for your analysts in the spokes is decreasing. So over time, there is a sort of need to move your resource around to maintain a system like this. I think, I don't know, I've just got 2 more slides. We're good for time. I just threw them in, yeah. So yeah, just 2 more slides about benefits and also drawbacks. So benefits are for both the end user and for the developer. So obviously reduces duplication of effort by reusing code and having a single copy of your code to maintain. Reducing resource requirements for indicator production. Improving the consistency of methods that are used between the teams, and reassurance by producing a QA dashboard. And then for the developer, obviously we've got a robust and controlled process, which facilitates code maintenance and automated unit testing. And also this process really facilitates code collaboration. So we've worked with a really transient team of developers who come and go. Because everything's on Git, it's really easy to manage the development in branches and merge things into your deployed version. And we've used agile development, so sprints. We're still this is kind of a finished product in a way, but we're also still working continuously to implement new methods. Like some of our indicators have really non-standard methods, and we're still working on developing the code so that those can be within the scope of what our tool can do. And then I think not many people talk about the drawbacks, but I think there are a couple of drawbacks. So previously, obviously, a team has had control of their own code, and if something needs to change, they can do a really quick and dirty fix. I'll just change this, I won't change the version, I won't tell anyone, or save it, I'll just run it and do it. So I think the main drawback is that because this process is quite robust, if you do want to change it, it can take a little bit longer because you need to go through all the steps and make sure everything's documented and won't be forgotten the next time you run your code. So you could argue it's a drawback, or you could argue it's a benefit. I just threw in these slides really to signpost the Goldacre review and the RAP strategy, because Lucy Vickers couldn't be here and she was going to present something around those as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Come on. So I think this is what I'm really excited about, is that the move from people just doing stuff to people doing stuff in a structured way. But I think one of our jobs today is to help you also share what you're doing. So I really like the code maturity diagram, but we would say actually there's a step. The first thing is to write a blog post telling people you're going to do it. So they really start about it, said, we are going to do this. And then that lets people join in on your journey. And also they don't have to join in when you're ready. They can join in when they're ready. So letting people reach in when they need it, because it's all on the web. So there's, in addition to all of the great tools you talked about there, we would encourage you all to write, as well as having a repository, do 2 other things, which is to write story blogs about your work and write technical blogs about how you've done it and what was hard and what was easy, because that then makes it so much easier for people to engage with what you've built and your pipeline, if you like, without having to go into your repo, read all the README. They can read a short piece around that, and it makes it. I think that's the next step that we have to talk about. So I'll stop talking. Do we have any questions? We've got one question there. One question there. Go on, you. The half a question. And last time we didn't go. So you can be first.
Do you need this?
Wait, I'll tell you what. We're going. Will you keep that one? Ruby's going to run around with. You collect the next one. So who are you? Where are you from? And your question.
Right, hello. Thank you for this. Very nice. My name's Dave. I'm from UK Health Security Agency, and we work primarily with genomics data, integrating that into health databases. My question relates to almost the very end of I was waiting for that slide about the drawbacks, because I found as an end, not so much as an end user, but sort of one of those fuzzy people who talked about earlier, somebody who analyzes data, produces data, works with the data. We have a core bioinformatics group and software development group, but as you say, it can be very, very slow to feed into them, and their resources are often stretched far beyond the trivial requests that I have to modify something. Do you encourage sort of pull requests and forking of your repositories to allow end users to perhaps take a bit of charge of the development?
Yeah, okay, that's a really interesting question. So of the packages I just described there, I think only one is on GitHub, so publicly shared, because the other ones are things that you need access to our internal systems to use. But I've created some other packages as well that are also on GitHub, and it's always a dilemma that you really want to share your code because you want to get it out there. You think, right, this is really useful to lots of other people. You want to put it out on GitHub, but then you don't want to be lumbered with a kind of responsibility to respond to every single person or request or pull request or message that comes back. So I'm an author of 2 packages that are publicly shared, and one of them I get hardly any communication from. It runs really smoothly. It's great. And I get an odd email from someone around the world, and I find that quite satisfying. I'm like, oh yeah, I like this. Someone's using it out in Australia or something. And the other one, I've shared it because I knew there were people in local authorities in the country who wanted to use the functions within it. But there's also bits in it I'm not that happy with, and it's quite hard then to share that code, and then you get comments, and I kind of put a bit of a disclaimer on it saying I'm sharing it because these bits will be really useful to you, but these bits are a bit experimental and we don't really have the resource to, we have the resource to do what we need to do with it, but if we're enhancing it for things that we don't need, that's not something we can really fund and finance. Is that where your question's heading?
I was just relating it back to your sort of initial diagram of the 11 teams that all wanted to use the same data in similar but different overlapping ways. There'll always be some innovation at the periphery which needs something slightly different, slightly new, a different parameter, a different set of slightly different way of viewing the data, for example, or
Yeah, so because we've just integrated as Public Health England into Department of Health and Social Care. We both previously had branding apps that we would use, like branding packages that we would use to create reports and things. And obviously our branding's all changed, and one app would do some things that the other one couldn't do, and vice versa. So we have kind of got a process in place for pull requests on those packages where it's defined within the package what that process is and what the expectation is and who is responsible for what. So we're encouraging people to contribute code and improve the packages, but by a sort of defined process.
Yeah, I just want,
Okay, I'm going to chair this now. You can let's pick up over lunch, I think. Yeah. So thanks very much for that question. We're going to pick up that. But I think it's really important how you manage innovation in a process that is being more structured. And we've got some ideas about how you do that. And being more open allows you to do that, I think. Okay, who was next? Questions?
I have half a question.
We'll got half a question there. Your name, where you're from, any question, please.
Yeah, I'm Mark. I'm working for the NHS BSA. So yeah, it was really just to ask where can I access the packages that you were showing, but then you've just said that some of them aren't public. Yeah,
so well, the one that's public is the one that calculates different statistics, so it could do it en masse for loads of data. As long as you've grouped your data by what you want to produce, then it's a great package to use. That's on CRAN, so you can just download it from CRAN.
What's it called?
PHE indicator methods, that one's called.
Oh, right.
So it's just calculating directly standardised rates and things. But we used to have an Excel tool and you could do one at a time. And now in our package you can just whack all your data through and generate lots.
All right, thanks.
Great. Next question. So we've got one over here. Was there another question? Right, this last question, and then we're going to... Oh, Mark. Okay, cool.
Hi.
Hi, thanks. It was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed the presentation. I had a question of...
So what's your name?
So, hi, I'm Alistair. I work NHS Digital. I live in Leeds. That's where I'm from. There's a question about where you're going from that sort of, almost like that chaos on that slide with the 15, 20 spreadsheets and scripts, and then going to that sort of more functionalised way of working. Is how did you sort of start locking down on, what those functions should do? And how do you start sort of defining that? So at the back of my mind, I've got a conversation we had at work around, how you calculate BMI, and there's 6 different ways to do it, right? And everyone, team A calculates it like this, team B may use a different method, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a governance structure? How do you start locking down on what might be a common, promoting a common way of doing it when you've got kind of lots of legacy?
Are you asking for an ideal or how it worked?
Well, how does it work? How does it work for you? Because you've obviously got it working, which is fantastic.
So I took on a role to manage this project 3 years ago. And at that point in time, someone had already developed the first package, which would connect to our database and pull back data. And I had already written the statistics package. And so the role was created because we could see this pipeline. You could see that there was these other gaps where we could create more packages to produce that full pipeline and pull all that together. So we the first bits happened maybe by accident, when you have a few analysts who are just a bit innovative and they've done these things, and then you sort of see the potential for where that might go. So I'd say that's probably how it did work. I'm not saying that's the best way for it to work.
No, but it worked, right? So that's really interesting. About sort of starting small and not worrying too much about the standardisation, is I guess what I'm hearing there. And then as you get, as more people use it, you get feedback and change those functions, or I don't know.
I don't know, actually. I think it has been standardised from the start. Is that what you're talking about? So we did follow sort of some best practice and standard procedure. My background in R is really not very conventional, because the first thing I did was develop packages, and I have these big gaps in my R knowledge of like some quite basic things that I've never done because I went straight in and did this. So I kind of started from looking at Hadley Wickham's, this is how you create a package, and that's what we did. We followed his process to do that.
I'm more thinking where you've got teams with calculating what might sound like the same metric, but doing it in 6 different ways, and then you're coming and saying, right, we're going to create a function for
no, so we
BMI.
do have an overriding methods team that I used to sit on in my previous role. So we have a methods team who are responsible for approving the methods of all our indicators that go into fingertips, and they're all mainly sort of statistician background people, so that they're not necessarily coders, but they're...
So you use them as kind of a body to lock down what was acceptable.
So there is already quite a stringent process for any indicator that's going to be published on our fingertips website goes through quite a stringent process of approval before it will be published, of all its methods and the metadata behind it.
No, cool, that's good. So you can be able to kind of lean on that.
That already existed, yes. Yeah.
Cool. It feels like there should be a story blog of how that happens that could be shared somewhere, but I don't know where you would put that blog. Maybe Open Data Saves Lives, and this is what happened.
I think there's a wider, so we have an internal methods group, but I think there's a wider group that includes NHS Digital and other, there is a indicator methodology group that's broader than just us.
That could be cool to link into and sort of think about how we do it.
There's this thing called the web, you'd be able to search on this thing called Google and find it. Imagine if someone had written it down. I don't know. I'm just, spitballing a bit here, but who knows? Right. We do have time for the last question because we did give ourselves quite a lot of time. So Mark, if you want to just take your question.
Yeah, I just very quickly on that. That's really interesting because you would think everyone records COVID the same or frailty, and they don't at all. So regionally, that works quite well if you've got a small enough group of people that you can get stuff done. So I think kind of me meeting you is quite interesting because I can go and try stuff really quickly. So we had to try and align how we recorded COVID during COVID really quickly, and we'd managed to get it done with a couple of clinicians. We need to do it quickly. Mine was more a comment really, and my kind of wider interest is in the some work I'm doing in Health Education England about starting to classify all these new roles of data architect, data analyst, data scientist, and so on. And I'm interested in your opinion. Maybe it's just a comment, and you can reply if you want or not, or say it's too difficult. I feel like we're at quite a key point at the moment where people either keep being generalists So I've got analysts, and they used to work in Access. Then they learnt SQL. Then they learnt R. Then they learnt ClickView. Then they learnt Power BI. Now they're starting to pick up Python. Or you go for someone who's absolutely amazing at SQL and just leave them in the corner and kind of go to them and create more kind of, I'll call them business partners, who can kind of go and talk to the ops team, but then come back to a group of nerds who are amazing at SQL and R and so on. And I'm in a real conundrum point at the moment where I kind of let them go one way or try and retain them and go, don't bother learning R because you'll never get to where Paul is on R. Paul will do your R for you. And it goes back to Dave's point about it's just that it's a comment, but I'm interested in your opinion, because we feel like we're at a real tipping point now in terms of trust. I've got about 100 analysts. I can let them all gradually learn the new exciting thing, or I can say, I'm really sorry, you're just never going to get there, just stop.
I think it's another really interesting one, because I think was your name Tom? Sorry, I think it links to Tom's question to Seb as well about software development. And certainly in our organisation, our data science team is made up mainly of analysts who have become data scientists. But out there are data scientists who maybe weren't ever analysts, they're just data scientists, and equally software developers. And it's like, who should we be recruiting to be able to do the things we want to do the best we can do them? I'm not sure I don't know if I have the answer.
So this is fascinating. As someone who sort of runs a team of web developers, data scientists, generalists, innovators who do projects and then feedback, that the thing that kills all that is when you run projects and not teams, because it doesn't allow the specialists to share what they do quickly, because they're working on a project. So they deliver the project and they deliver another project. So one of my points would be on this is, how do you create teams that can build up invested knowledge, work ways of doing things quickly. Oh yeah, I've got that library, the last time we did it, so they can do things in 2 days, which might take a project. Another project might imagine that they have to have a discovery phase, analysis phase, a whole review phase, when actually it could be done in a week by a team, because they built up that invested knowledge. But it is a challenge of how you do that, and I think you probably need a little bit of both. But having a great data science team that sits within a trust that gets called upon to deliver and then joins in is something that you might want to explore. And we need your microphone, so just so people can hear online. And we're recording this, so we're going to edit this later on.
Sure. Yes, me, it's Dave again. Here at UKHSA, we've got like a mixed model of the type that you're alluding to, where we have a core team that is pretty specialist, most of whom started as computer scientists with various formal statistical or programming and coding qualifications and credentials. We have what's now called embedded bioinformaticians, or embedded in the various specialist units who want to do various processes according to their specialist knowledge. I've got a PhD in molecular biology and have turned into becoming a coder and writing small packages, because I know bridging that role between the two worlds. And if you've got just a whole load of SQL people, they're not going to be able to talk the language of the clinicians or the public health officials. But if you've got public health officials who can't speak the data language, so we've got these sort of embedded bridging people, of which I'm pioneering, hopefully, amongst others. But I think that's the sort of person that needs to be cultivated. Now, I'm worried that, not worried actually, I just want to make sure that your classification system's not going to miss out on these sort of more generalist, jack of all trades, master of none, who are absolutely critical to interfacing between the different people.
I think that's where the web comes in. If you've got a YouTube video of something that's worked, if you've got an artifact, a blog post, that really helps the generalists and storytellers to build. And that's one of the big gaps that I see in all of this, is that there's loads of teams that are working themselves out, but they're not creating artifacts and assets that can be used and reused, maybe in different contexts. You might imagine that someone's working in transport economics might link their work to someone in health, and they may not even ever talk to each other. They might not need a weekly call, which just kills progress, doesn't it? That's managed by a project manager. And that's the dream, is if we can create those assets where people can join in and make friends without actually meeting each other, you know, and then when they get to a point where they maybe built something 80%, you have a working session for 2 or 3 days, and then you finish it. Those innovative ways of working where you're funding teams to do work rather than delivering projects is where I think the hope that we can get to. But it does require a massive change in the way that organisations are run and how power is shared, and maybe status is garnered in large organisations. So we need to look at that. Okay, so I think we're about finished on that one, and we're going to move on to the next talk. So we've got Sam described this as a triple threat earlier on, but what we're going to do, we've got Chris, Alistair and Sam are going to talk about NHS Digital, about how they're rolling out RAP. What we're going to do is Sam's going to do the talk, and then we'll get the 3 people to take questions afterwards. Does that make sense? Or is there something that you... Well, Chris and Sam do it, because... Yeah.
I'm just really a very, very brief warm-up act for the main event. This is Sam. I've just remembered, I'm not sure if I introduced myself properly last time. I'm Chris Roebuck. I'm Chief Statistician at NHS Digital. And just over a year ago, we really, really wanted to grasp this. We'd got lots of new graduates and new colleagues joining with real skills in kind of open source software development. Others in the Government Statistical Service were taking similar approaches to RAP. And we thought, this is our moment, we really want to get on and do this. But because we've got so many different teams, so many established processes, a bit like some of the previous presentations were talking about, the real challenge that Sam's going to talk about, how we grappled, how we succeeded, the bits we still found challenging, is around doing this at real scale. So it isn't just 1 or 2 areas. It's the whole lot kind of moving across to a new way of working. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Sam.
Hey everyone, so thanks Chris. So I'm Sam Hollings, and I'm a data scientist, one of these generalists we were hearing about, we're going to talk about the other talks today have really helpfully for me spoken a lot about what RAP is, how you do it, even the end point and how great that looks. But rather than tell you more of that, I really wanted to talk about our journey of going from, training up a few people to do RAP to thinking about how we're going to get everybody doing RAP. And it's been an interesting journey. Down. Yeah, cool. So, I won't go in, we all know how great RAP is, I won't spend too much time talking about that, transparency, utility through sharing code publicly in open source languages, quality and improved speed through automating stuff, and resilience to change through, the way that, portable code and use one of the platforms, that's all great. And you're training up your analysts, you've got, some analysts, some pipelines, some rapified pipelines, RAPs, that's all wonderful. But then, you've got all these other analysts and all these other pipelines, and you need a plan about how you get to the situation where you've got everybody doing RAP, really, or at least every team able to deploy those skills and use all this cool stuff that's been made and share from it and all the rest of it. So today we're going to talk to you about the importance, at least in our organization, of having this central RAP squad to get it going. And then beyond that, monitoring the progress of RAP so that, you can plan it out, I guess. Promoting RAP up and down the organization and how important that is to keep the sort of momentum going and get people knowing about it. Critically getting analysts and stakeholders to own RAP, because it's not something that's done to them, it's something they should have ownership of and be thinking about. And then this all hopefully comes together to lead to making RAP becoming a self-propagating thing that just happens. It's not led by the central team. The central team will then just sort of merge into the general pool of RAP advocates in the organization. So before diving into all that stuff, it's important to talk about the challenge of RAP in NHS Digital. So our sort of role is, we gather and store a lot of patient data, which is really wonderful. We process it to make publications that describe the state of the health service, and ultimately, we use that to inform policymakers, the public, and improve NHS and care systems. That's wonderful, great. However, we've got many different tech stacks running concurrently. Some are quite manual, so we're using like R, Python, Excel. We've got some guys using SAS. And when I first started working here, we were using SSIS. I'm sure it's used in some places. Like lots of SQL, SSRS, got S3 buckets, SQL servers. Like we've got stuff all over the place. And many of our analysts, a bunch of them do know Python, Git, R, SQL, these sort of things, but many of them don't know modern open source software. They've got incredible amounts of knowledge about the systems, the NHS, what needs to be made and how it's done. But yeah, they don't always have some of these skills. And also they're very, very busy, like especially during the pandemic, they've got more and more busy, more and more to do. And so yeah, there's this challenge about, and also, there's loads of them. We've got loads of analysts and loads of publications. And so this is a challenge, obviously. And trying to see this holistically as well, because a lot of our teams are honestly quite siloed, and they work on the one data set or a few data sets. They don't really see the other processes, and trying to see the whole picture and trying to create a way forwards sort of necessitates having some guys that can take a step back, a sort of central rap squad, you could say. So we set up this central rap squad that was it's mostly a squad of data scientists, actually, which I think the reason why that was chosen is because the data scientists, at least most of them in ours, are inherently quite generalist. So they have the analytical knowledge. Often they've been analysts, but they're often also programmers. I was a data manager, I did a PhD, I've been analyst and programmer, and yeah, so they're a natural fit. They can communicate with all the stakeholders that need to be communicated with. And these guys, Central Rap Squad, really important to define what rap is, because they can see the big picture and they can work it out, but also really importantly to make it achievable, because that perfect goal is difficult, especially when you're starting with a lot of manual processes and you don't know how to get there. And so breaking it down in the diagram that we saw with all the levels before, really helpful. Things like, the aspiring sort of baseline, silver, gold, and then people can see progress and they can feel they're making their way forwards. Creating and maintaining and curating RAP resources. There's a lot of these on the internet about software development and DevOps and even just more specific RAP resources. But it was really important to make guidance that was specific to our systems and context, because we have a lot of weird quirks, and it just makes it easier for people if the guidance is specific and addresses these specifically. But we also didn't want to reinvent already good guidance as well. Championing RAP in the organization, so go out to teams and sell the benefits of RAP. Again, a lot of people talk about what RAP is, but in most presentations where I talk about RAP internally, I always start off with the benefit of RAP. Okay, this is going to save you time, it's going to make your job easier, really, really sell it to people. And also, importantly, to publicize those who've already done it. Talk about how great their work is, and look at what these guys have achieved, and make it an achievement for people to have done RAP. It's not just, it's a great thing that should be celebrated. And then, training people, so guiding people down the path of RAP, and hopefully making them into RAP champions themselves, making them spread the good word. And then finally, probably the most important one is being a point of support. So, ultimately, any process of change, people like having someone, a shoulder to cry on, someone to go to, so, people know us, they know we're there, they know where to find us, and that they can come and talk to us for help, advice, how to get going, how to continue, So yeah, we had the RAP squad, that's great. We started training some analyst teams and helping them rapify their publications, that's great. We also had some sort of self-starter teams who, without us specifically spending, a month or whatever working with a team, some of the guys just used our resources, all their own initiative, and started rapifying stuff on their own. That was also great. But we needed some way to keep track of all this. And it sounds sort of obvious to say it, but it's worth saying it anyway, because if you know what's going on, you can know where best to apply, an intervention to help things keep going. And so we got the analyst leads to fill in our RAP tracker for all our publications, which was sort of really, really useful, because then we could see how mature each process was, i.e. what level of RAP they'd achieved. and importantly, the benefits that they had got from doing RAP, which we're still encouraging people to report that. Like, people sort of, they do the RAP and then they don't always think about recording benefits, but it's really important we do that, because then we can know how it's going, know what, and use that to justify to people that this is a really good thing to do. Like, and sometimes there have been very big benefits, like processes that took hours to run taking, 20 minutes or something. Like, so yeah, let's celebrate it. And just making the process of, making the progress of the teams clearer, so then we can identify where we need to dive in and help out, like, or which teams, we can leave be because they're making great progress on their own. Promoting RAP. This is a super important one, and it's easy to sort of, especially it's got a lot of publicity recently, but I think still it's really important that our central team was promoting it to make sure that I think people really understood what it was, because it's a buzzword people use a lot, like, and a lot of people interpret it differently. Indeed, some teams thought it wasn't something they needed to do, whereas in my opinion it's something pretty much we all need to do. If we're using data in the organization that ultimately leads towards some publication output, we probably need to know what RAP is and what it really is. Like, and so we had loads of promoting ways of promoting. So we were doing weekly drop-in sessions. I literally have like an open door session, a call. Me and the guys sit on, people can come in. We do have monthly seminars where we have speakers talking about RAP or developments or their experiences. I got a slot on our directorate-wide briefing where I was talking about RAP. That was super high level, but I was just, enthusiastically selling it to, everybody basically. Like, and then I've organized on Thursday, I've got a workshop with the graduates. They've just arrived last week, and I'm in there telling them about RAP in their second week. Like, and, get them as soon as they come in the door, because that way they can get, even if they leave that session, and all they say is go to their team and say, hey, do you guys know about RAP? That's perfect. That's got the conversation started. Like, and in these things, really focused on two things primarily, because no one cares about the tech except for the analysts. Like, most people aren't analysts, so most people need to know about the benefits to the organization and the individual staff. Like, and I've got a bunch of slides about that, like what it actually means for them and what the brass tacks of it, what they'll save, how useful it is, and then linking it to their work, making it seem relevant and making it seem like a solution to their problems. So don't just say, yeah, you should put your stuff in GitHub, but explain why that's useful, like, and how that'll solve this particular problem I know they have. Even better, hopefully they'll tell me that. Like, and obviously the Goldacre review was really helpful because it brought RAP into the conversation. A lot of people are aware of it, and it mentioned RAP a lot. Like, and I've got a great slide where I go through, where I use lots of quotes from the Goldacre review to justify what I'm telling people to do. Like, very, very helpful. And we aimed at all levels as well. Like I said, because we did the directorate-wide briefing, we pitched it at directors, heads of programs, managers. We speak to analysts a lot personally because we have these drop-in sessions. That's usually analysts that come to that. But we've tried to talk to everybody because everybody has a part to play in RAP, and it's not just a thing that analysts do. Like, so yeah, we've obviously been selling it to everybody. That's great. We have the central RAP team. But what was really important is to get analysts to own RAP, because sometimes people think RAP is something done for them by experts or done to them. Like, it's just this thing. It happens. Now they've got the RAP pipeline. Like, cool. But we really wanted to work with the analysts to understand how to make the RAP pipeline. Well, how actually to make the RAP pipeline. It's not just make it for them or make it with them, but that they really grasped how to make it and that they owned the code base. So we took time to make guides on what each element of the code base was for, why, and all these things exist. But like, phrasing it in a way the analysts were happy with was really important to make it accessible to them. And critically how to review and learn from each other, because equally, it's not just us giving knowledge to analysts. We want to get to the point where the analysts share knowledge amongst themselves, review and learn from each other, not just us. Like, and yet, also really important, working with the senior analysts to strategize the rapification of their pipelines, and to, it's a good verb, isn't it? Like, how to plan how to spread the RAP knowledge amongst their team. Because it's not just, okay, we train up 2 of your guys, sweet. Like, we train up 2 of your guys and then think about how those guys might find time to train other people. And yet, so far, the analysts have taken a lot more ownership they've started to think about what they need, who they've got, what they need to do, and importantly, they're starting to tell my team, the RAP squad, what they need from us, which is really great, because rather than us pulling them, they're pulling us. It's a lot easier. It's easier for me. It means I know what the priorities are. And a really, really fun thing is we actually had a competition, which Chris sponsored, I suppose, for the first team to publish their code, which really motivated them. They were racing each other to get their code out. And that sort of thing made it more fun, I guess, and more, gave them ownership of it. So yeah, we're nearing the end now, but obviously all of this hopefully leads towards RAP becoming more self-propagating, because we're not quite here yet, honestly, but at the same time, RAP cannot be sustained by the work of a few heroes, a few people that are doing it, because you're going to be then left, they'll eventually leave, everybody might leave at some point, and you'll be left with a bunch of awesome stuff that people don't know how to use, so yeah, really our central RAP squad and the RAP champions, which are the more experienced people we've trained up elsewhere, are there to support others to learn, and if they were to manage every RAP project, if only they were to manage every RAP project, it might take 6 years to do all our pipelines. So we really need to promote an expectation that the people we train will ultimately, make more RAP pipelines for one, but also passing the knowledge and train others. But it is difficult given BAU pressures and, so we really need to prioritize burden reduction. And yeah, Alistair, do you want to finish off? Yeah, so yeah, I'm just going to rap about how it's going, really.
Resist making a rap joke. Oh no, cheers, Sam. So yeah, Sam's done a fantastic job. So he leads our central rap team and sort of rolling that out. So I just wanted to touch on kind of what the analytical teams have achieved. So I think the main thing is we've got 3 open rap pipelines now on GitHub. So when Smoking, Drinking, Drugs, which is a major publication that went live, it was on the BBC, and in 3 clicks you could get to the code. I thought that was really cool. It's sort of like a step in the right direction, indication of things to come. There's 2 other publications already out there, and there's a strong pipeline in the infamous RAP tracker, which we use for delivery and to drive commitment. And I think it's that really nice tension between local innovation, lots of really keen analysts, and scaling that out on the one hand, and then on the right hand saying, when are we going to deliver it? When's it going out? And I think it's one of those sort of good creative tensions to have. And I think the fact that we've gotten this far is we've got lots of good ingredients. We've got lots of senior leadership. Chris is a great sponsor. We've got a fantastic data science team that's sort of pushing things forward. And you've got a lot of analysts now sort of getting engaged. You've got a community of around 200 analysts, and you can sort of see it moving, which is fantastic. And the best thing is when people complain about being left out of RAP, and I've had a few of those conversations, and that's a good sign, because I feel, yes, come and join us. So I think that's a real result of Sam's good work, that they feel left out, and they're left out of the good stuff, and we can then bring them in. So I think that's, in a way, good pain. And we've got 20 or more pipelines, and we are tracking them on how many we're going to get live to Christmas. So that'll be hopefully really exciting. I think the other thing I just sort of touch on here is there's lots of sort of adjacent bits. There's that senior management sponsorship. There's the teams wanting to get involved, intercepting grads, which is fantastic. And there is the tech as well. And I think you need that role of sort of trying to knit where we need things from all those different areas. And there are various challenges across all those points, be it getting analysts time, making sure we can get the tech that actually does what we need it to do, which has definitely been challenging for us. And that's, sort of a constant battle. So it's not just RAP, it's all those adjacent bits and trying to coordinate that. And we're starting to take more of a structured delivery approach to that, really. So, we have boards and check on progress and that kind of stuff, which is feels quite old-fashioned, but I think is helping move things forward as well. So that's it.
And definitely check out our GitHub, our RAP community of practice, which there's a joke in our team that at every single meeting, call, whatever, I give that link at some point. I try and wedge it into every single meeting.
See if it works.
Yeah, scroll down. It looks better a bit further down. We're actually making a new web-pagey version of it, but yeah, lots of cool stuff in there. Have a look.
There's lots of cool stuff. It's not just code on there. There's lots of stuff around, processes, how we standardise stuff. That's hopefully useful.
Cool. Well, round of applause. And if we've got any questions, you could, of course, use GitHub Pages to create a website.
We are doing that, yeah. They're in the wrong with that.
And then it would be completely, why is it? All this could be just websites. Yeah, almost there. But it's great. So I've got a couple of questions, but any questions for the team? We've got one question there, question here. We've got 4 questions, right? We're going to try and get through all 4. Okay, so George, let's start with you, Georgina, shall we? We've got another microphone there. Share one of those. Yeah. So what's your name, where are you from, and your
I'm
question?
still Georgina Anderson from DHSC. Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's really interesting, and I think it's quite interesting that you've taken a different, when people are defining RAP and everyone has a bit of a different definition, I think what you've done is tackle a slightly different side of it to what we've done. So we focused a lot on taking away duplication of code, so having centralised things, everyone could use the same bit of code and maintain it once. And if I've understood correctly, what you've focused on is having a transparent code base for all the publications you produce. So you produce something and someone can click and they can see exactly what you've done. But have you, presumably in all your publications, there is some code that's the same or very similar. And how have you addressed that challenge, or is that something you yet to address? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. So you've sort of hit on the head, really. Our current priority is transparency and burden reduction. Yeah. Because it's almost like currently we sort of don't know our organization is quite big, and over time has grown. So when I first started working at NHS Digital, I had 600 people. Now it's got 3,000 or whatever. And it's quite siloed. The teams are in these literal tribes. They're called tribes. And it's quite tribal. It's almost like we don't know what is shared. So first, if we get all the code in the version control and everyone can see it, then we can start to have a second pass and make it all, because it'll be sort of some of it's really obvious. There are some really obvious things, say the way the figures are suppressed, which is not always done the same. Different publications do it different way for various reasons, national, lower levels, and But there are some really obvious, no doubt there were some quick wins. And I think some of that, there have been efforts to make common code bases so far, but sometimes they've not really taken off and people don't use them. But it's because everyone's not starting from the same start point. Whereas I think if we can get everybody using our baseline level of RAP is using an open source software, publishing the code, reviewing it, and linking it to the publication, then we're somewhere, and there's burden reduced, it's clear what's we use and all the rest of it, and then we can, hopefully very quickly then start to, okay, that's obviously the same, and then, but it's just the order, that was just the way that we decided to do it.
I think, sorry, do you want to come back on that?
I wasn't undermining what you have achieved, it's just, you've sort of tackled it in a different order, and I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong thing to do first in that.
I think it's really important just to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to start, because what we see a lot is people prefer to talk and not to do. And what I love about this is you're all starting in slightly different ways, and things are happening, which is good to see.
I think that you're right to pick up on that difference of approaches. I mean, there's two. Is that we're very focused on stats, where I think we've got 130 publications that we're tracking RAP against, and I think as Sam has laid out, it's a really complex ecosystem due to history. I think mainly, both culturally and technically as well. So we decided kind of going for that first. But I think what's really interesting comparing it to your presentation is that you've started almost from the data, from that data landing to the right. And we took a decision in the early days to try and move forward to say, well, we've got these created data sets that emerge from various pipelines, and we'll take that from that created data set that the analysts work with to the publication, i.e. to what's going out on the internet, and we'll get that open. Now, I've got a slide that I share that basically says there be dragons to the left prior to that landing zone, and there are dragons and ogres and complexity there. And we kind of made the decision early on to say, well, we're going to ignore that for now, and we're going to rapify basically to the right of our tidy data. And that may or may not have been the right decision. The other option was to try and do something end-to-end, but for a range of reasons, both technology, organisations, sponsors, us moving across different directorates, we decided too hard, but that's on our radar. Does that make sense? I'm kind of like, there's this tidy data, but we're slowly really prettily rapifying, which I think is fantastic. But there's this realm of dragons over here, which is true end-to-end pipeline.
I think there's always some dragons to the left. However much you extend the left, there's always something a bit further left that makes it not entirely reproducible because there's something out of your control.
Well, when we get to the point of collection...
I'm going to share this now. This sounds like a really good conversation for this afternoon about how we might improve and do things. So, yeah, fab. We've got two or three more questions, if you can just pass on. Sorry about that, Alistair.
No, I'll let you off. Get me a coffee.
Yeah. Who's next? Got a question over there. Name, where you're from, and question, please.
Craig Shenton from NHS England. My question's kind of for Alistair, I guess. Talk about dragons to the left, about dragons to the right, if that makes sense.
Stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
Can you list them all and put them in a blog post, please?
Yeah, essentially, like, how are you dealing with tools that have been kind of decided we're using, like point-and-click tools like Tableau, Power BI, stuff like that? Because, you know, we'd love to do RAP, but we're essentially stuck using the tools that we're paying for, so there's always a problem with that.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. People don't know I'm quite involved in the Viz side of things as well. I think there's a dragon to the right and the left we're probably talking about here. So there's a dragon to the right in terms of visualization tools such as Tableau, Click, Power BI, and how do you make those truly open and reproducible, because obviously they're COTS products. So the current strategy we're saying at the moment is we want to get the RAP pipelines going to those dashboards open, right? And the underlying fact tables and how those are produced open. So classic old BI, push everything out the front end down to the data layer, and it also means we can plug in and out different tools, and there's lots of good advantages to that. But it's not perfect, right? The other strand of impacting that front end thing is it is on GitHub. We've got the templates that we're now going to be using for a lot of our visualization up there, openly accessible. So you can see the visuals in Tableau, for example. We want to do an equivalent for Power BI. And potentially our Shiny as well. So hopefully that means a user can say, I can see the pipeline that's produced the data, and I'll go to this other GitHub site where the Viz folks have published the templates they've used. Maybe they published the TBX, which is the file, a Tableau file or a Power BI file of that actual dashboard with empty data in it, or test data, sorry, so you can see it. So you can at least start to make it reproducible and understand how that's been done, and share it, and all the rest of it, which is all good stuff. That's not as good as purely open RAP, but I think you've got to balance the fact of, it's classic, code everything or buy a tool. And I think in an ideal world, you'd love to code everything because then we can do something truly end-to-end, truly transparent. Reality is people have got to produce dashboards very quickly. They've got varying skill sets. There'll always be a niche. There's a reason why Tableau was bought by Salesforce for many billions of pounds, right? There is a niche in that market. And I think you've got to play with it and accept that imperfection. And I think there's the dragon to the left. I think you mentioned about different platforms and different ways of working. There's point-and-click tools there as well. For SaaS, for example, you can't extract out the back end and open that pipeline very easily. They did say they were working on that. Alteryx is apparently a bit better, and there's some really good conversations we're having there. So I think there we've got to work with the tool providers to say, no, if you're working with us, you've got to produce your code. Even if it's in a pretty GUI and you're pointing and dragging Alteryx, there's got to be a back end where we can take that out and publish it and link it together. But that's where I think we've got to, through Analyst X and various forums like that, exert pressure to make that happen. But often, public sector, we're a small fish in their revenue stream. So that's really hard. It's a challenge. I haven't got an answer to that. Does that make sense? On two dragons.
Okay. Right, we're going to move on to the next talk, but I think there's something that you've underestimated your power here, because I'm sure if we on your behalf wrote a blog post, and you might notice the theme about where we called these Tableau out, Alteryx out, Power BI out, and say, look, you're not good enough. I think we underestimate the influence that has, and how much power you could exert by saying, look, we're using these, but we're really not happy about those tools, and if they want to get on board, they might have to change the way that they do things. So I would say that do not underestimate the power of the soft power that the NHS has, especially in the UK, because everyone loves the NHS, right? So if that's said many times by different people, that will start to happen. Okay, we're going to move on now to a talk by, so look, come on, last round of applause. And I would just say that that's a really great example about how the work has been done about RAP in the NHS Digital, and it's all on the web, and you can find it, and you can search for it on, using a search engine, you can find the stuff, and it's, you don't have to go through lots of sign-off from branding or corporate to get that on there, do you? No, it's just on the web, which is amazing, and I think it's a great example that people could use elsewhere as well. So let's move on. We've got Lois Charlton from the ONS, and I am now going to see if, yeah, here we go. Fingers crossed. We've got another video. I'll press pause, and then the same way at the end, Luce is already in the waiting room, and we'll admit at the end. But hopefully this is gonna, if I make it a large screen, press play.
Hello, my name is Luce Charlton, and I'll be talking to you about how we achieved a packaged wrap from a semi-automated pipeline for one of our production teams. I'll be talking to you about how we implemented best practice by giving you a pipeline example, then preparations before supporting the wrap development, then the wrap development timeline, and finally lessons learned. So to give you an example of the pipeline that we used an annual publication about suicides in England and Wales. The goal of this pipeline is to produce an Excel workbook with 15 formatted tables for official publication. This is what we have to submit to our publication team. It has a very particular type of format for each sheet, including a table of contents, guidance, and notes. Originally, the pipeline contained many separate scripts in R. We have about 13 different scripts, each 300 or 400 lines each, and they were stored on a shared drive. And as you can see in the example of the code here, there was a lot of repetition where various tables were copy-pasted, code where small amendments were made. So in terms of a RAP minimum viable product, only a few of the criteria were achieved. So there were many manual steps involved in the pipeline. In addition to running the code, there were steps where separate SQL code was run outside of R. There was manual copy pasting into Excel. There was no use of Git and no functions. Data was read in from both the database and CSV files. So there were many manual steps, so they weren't minimized. There was a degree of good practice quality assurance because the whole pipeline was actually run twice by two different teams. And at the end of the pipelines, the results, the tables were compared manually in Excel. So there was a degree of good practice QA achieved this way. The code was in R, so we did have use of open source software. There was some degree of embedded documentation, though not really sufficient for a RAP. There was some comments embedded in the code, but they weren't extensive enough to follow if you were new to the code. There was also a degree of peer review achieved by way of having the code run twice and the results compared. And the code would be rerun by different members of the team, sometimes different years. So I guess the code would be reviewed to a degree, but not formally so. There was no version control, and the code also wasn't shared other than within the team. The entire pipeline took about a week per person to run, and 2 people would run the pipeline, after which QA would be executed. So now that we have achieved a reproducible analytical pipeline on this publication, our code is now in Git, and we have created an R package called annual.suicides. As you can see here, the structure is very simple. We have one config file, which was about 10 lines with various variables that could be amended at each run. And we have one main script, which was now only about 93 lines long. And we have organized the package with various scripts in an R folder. There was documentation in the man folder, and we also just made unit tests. And inside the scripts folder, we now only have about 5 different scripts, which contain a number of functions each, and they're very well organized and much easier to follow and amend if needed. So the code now is very well organized with small functions. We try to break up bigger functions into smaller ones so that each unit could be tested and they could be repeated much more easily without copy-pasting various bits of code. And as you can see, we've also used oxygen commenting to have a clear structure to each function in terms of its documentation. So we now have all the criteria over the minimum viable product achieved. The code is in a package. It doesn't require any manual steps other than running the package. We have good practice QA and all the other criteria also achieved. And we even have achieved some of the advanced RAP criteria. We have introduced code style. We also have now got the code in functions. We have the code packaged, we have function documentation in place, we have introduced unit testing, and because the code is packaged, dependency management is automatically included in the package as well. So the only criteria, advanced RAP criteria we haven't achieved is continuous integration, which is probably overkill for this type of package. So now the resources required to run the entire pipeline is about half a day for one person, so going from a week for 2 people each, that's much improved. So what did we do before we supported this development of this RAP pipeline? We first made sure that we understood the requirements of the pipeline. So what is it supposed to do? How is that achieved? What does it currently look like? So to do that, we had a number of calls with the entire team. And after that, we were better able to support their needs. We then assessed the resource requirements. So first, what does the capability of the team look like? What training might they need? And we provided training we have various training courses already on the ONS Learning Hub. We also provided a resource list with additional training. We have data camp licenses that we give out to people, which is very helpful in achieving things like basic R skills. And we also provide bespoke team training where needed, such as Git training, which was needed for the entire team. Who should be involved in developing the RAP pipeline? We would say everyone, or at least as many people as possible. It's very useful to have analysts at various levels attend the guided coding sessions that we set up. It is just really helpful to see how this is built and to learn from the start how you would set up this package, to also understand the package and be able to support it further. We would say in the guided coding sessions, having 3 or more people within a session is a good idea. There are times where coding is just a little bit tricky, something goes wrong. Even an experienced coder might not always immediately see the solution to that. And having 3 or more people in a session means there's another pair of hands that can just do a quick search or try and solve the problem a bit more quickly than just having 2 people. And what time would be required to achieve the RAP? That depends on the extent of the pipeline, how much code needs to be redeveloped, and how involved is it. And we settled on 1 to 2 times a week, having a 4-hour session, guided coding session, and we had to do this for several months in the case of this pipeline. So what did the actual development timeline look like? We ensured that before starting the guided coding sessions, we have to make sure every single person in the team that's going to work the pipeline needs to have at least basic coding skills. That was already the case in this team, but it's still useful to make sure that the least experienced coders have some basic, for example, R course done. And then we found that the whole team needed Git training, so everyone had to make sure they had some Git basics under their belt. So then from the start of this developing the pipeline, we started immediately with setting up a package so that you start with a very clear structure that everyone can get used to. And as you go along, you write the functions and make sure that all code gets written into functions other than the main script. Sometimes you have to redesign the functions later, start with what you can do, and you can always look through it again at a later time to make sure the functions might need to be a bit smaller, for example, or subdivide them. That can always be done later. Once the package was fully written, we introduced unit testing. And actually, as we did this, we found we could still rewrite some functions to be more modular. And then unit testing gets easier following that too. We then had to achieve the actual spreadsheet production, which we also have various functions to do. And finally, produce an R Markdown report so we can track errors and assist with the QA at the end. We introduced coding style from early on as you go, so you can just get that down as a habit in everybody who's coding. And we gradually introduced Voxygen comments to each of the functions. So initially we just wrote the functions, then we started introducing, along with coding style, how to get the Voxygen comments in there. And at the end of the pipeline, they were there for every function. So what have we learned from how we've done this, this entire RAP pipeline with this team? I would say the general message is to take away the fear or the unknown of what a RAP actually is and how that works. That goes for any type of coding. So take away the fear of what our studio looks like, for example, but also what a package actually looks like. And it's not as scary as it sounds. We can guide you through it. That's okay. So setting a welcoming, friendly and no-fail environment is quite essential for this. So make sure that even very inexperienced analysts or other support staff feels that they can contribute, or if they don't know how to do it, they still try it. You could still encourage them to run a session themselves, so make them do the code sharing, the screen sharing, and do the actual coding, but completely guided by people who are more experienced. And as you go along, that will really help in in them achieving better skills and feeling far more confident about what they're doing. Allow time to familiarize, getting used to any new environment. It takes a bit of time, so don't rush it. Just take your time, and especially the first few sessions, just let everyone get settled. Avoid or explain jargon. Just people who are somewhat inexperienced with coding might not know what's, say if you start with a config file, they might not know what that means. So explain that is a configuration file where we just set the various variables, show them what it looks like, and take your time to do that. Provide training and guidance as you go along from the beginning, but also if people turn out that they're finding things difficult, you can encourage them to learn more and improve in that. And finally, involve all as much as possible. Like I said before, I'll reiterate, try and encourage even those who might be quite shy or underconfident to give them a chance to do the coding. You're there to help. We literally sometimes say, now comes the colon, now comes the space, put quotes here, that's fine. That's how they learn, and you can see them improve day by day. And at the end of it, what you end up with is a team who understands the package, is able to develop it and support it further without your assistance in the long run, and is able to train up new people coming in to uptake the pipeline as well. And that's a wrap from me. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Can you hear us, Luz?
Yeah. Can you?
Perfect. So we've got, thanks very much for that conversation and your demonstration of actual analytical pipelines working. I've got a question about how a large organization that's essential to data infrastructure in the UK, how do you, maybe you can answer this in the end, but how are you communicating with organisations like the whole of the NHS and everything that sits with it and others? So maybe if you could share with us how you're sharing your approach to this with other organisations. And then we've got a couple of questions in the room as well. I'm actually here.
Recording in progress.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got a message popping in. Yeah. Shall I answer your question right now then?
Yeah, do that, and then people in the room are having to think about questions for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to answer your question, but I'll start with what I do know. So we certainly have an incentive to work towards RAP across our organisation. This is something that Ian Diamond has announced in general, and it's like we've seen in the NHS presentation earlier as well. Personally, I am in the dedicated RAP team for our division, which is the Health Analysis and Life Events division. And we are, my team, we're supporting everybody in our division to achieve a RAP. One of the goals of the RAP minimum viable product is to share the developed package we are somewhat limited in terms of if there's any references to private data or controlled data, we have to be careful what we can share. But in general, the code is definitely shared within the GitLab environment that's within our organization. So we share it internally that way. I'm not entirely sure how we would share that across organizations or how that integrates in general. I was very interested to see the other two presentations, the three presentations, especially the one from the NHS, which clearly has a very similar approach to ours in terms of making sure the team develops their RAP and supporting that. So that would be great to have that conversation. I am not entirely sure how our organization achieves that. So yeah, it'd be great to have the conversation about that and see what other...
Maybe there's something to work on there. Okay, so we've got time for 2 or 3 questions before we start. So, Sam? Name, where you're from, question.
Yep, hey there, it's Sam Hollings from NHS Digital. It's great that you mentioned the whole sharing the code thing, because that's what I wanted to ask you about how you guys share your code publicly and how you go about that. And yeah, I suppose also to plug on our guidance, we've published our process that we go through to publish our code externally. So like on our GitHub, you can see that. And it's got like checklists and things so that stakeholders can feel confident in it all. But yeah, I'd love to hear about what sort of stuff you guys are publishing, and I guess what you don't think you should publish, and I suppose why.
I'm really sorry, but I couldn't understand what you said there. Could somebody repeat, please?
Okay, yeah, that's my job. So Sam's really interested in what you're publishing, where, what you're going to do next.
Yeah. As far as I know, we are sharing the code on GitLab, which is an application of Git that's within our organization. So we, especially within the Hale division, we have a number of codes that we share across the publication teams. For example, we are developing a package that has lots of functions in it to achieve that Excel file format that's specific to our department that we need to do the whole NS, but we all need to have that in every publication. So although we are working with the individual publication teams, everybody will need that code or at least a basic version of it. And this already existed. We have a sort of central Hale hub where we have a number of functions that people can use, but we're working on making that more accessible to the whole division, making that usable for everyone from a basic point so that the functions are very modular, because everybody will have to have their own particular types of sheets for what data tables that they need to produce, and there might be some variation in there, but the structure will generally be the same. So we want to make a backbone that everybody can use. So we are sharing internally at the moment via GitLab, but I don't believe that we go beyond that just yet. But it'll be really interesting. We have to start thinking about that because it will be important to streamline. I don't really know what other divisions are doing at the moment. So I'm in our team. I am not the senior person, so it's possible that they might know more. They wanted to join in as well for the Q&A, but they're not here. I'm checking my messages because I can see that my line manager is typing something. So I'm just going to have a look. Okay. Nothing there.
Yeah. If only there was an organisation like Open Innovations that helped businesses and organisations publish their data and code openly. I mean, I don't know whether we could maybe have a follow-up around that. Yeah.
We need guidance on how we do that.
Yeah. So Sam's just helpfully said that NHS Digital published all their guidance about how you share your code and data. So I'll get that link. We'll get it sent over to you, Luce. You can check in with your line manager.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. There we go. Collaboration in real time. Fantastic. We've got another couple of questions for you. The way it's working in the room is that we can hear, but you can't because of the way the AV is set up. But we've got one more question.
So one thing that I'm seeing...
Question. Yeah. Well, name, where you're from, question.
So I'm still Tom, still from the strategy unit. One thing that seems to be coming up over and over again is we say that for RAP we need to be using open source software, and at the risk of sounding like a shill for industry, is that actually correct? I mean, people are using SQL Server from Microsoft, Oracle perhaps, And those are all things that are producing code that we can commit to version control versus something like Excel or Power BI where it's a binary blob, we struggle to commit that to version control. But equally, we could have open source software like some discrete event simulation software like JamSim that's producing a binary blob that doesn't reproduce very well. So it's the thing that we're doing not open source software, but producing something that can become open source, or the code is openable.
So the question that's coming in is more of a philosophical question about, and a market dynamic question about open source versus commercial and how we share that. I think that is a conversation that's probably done best over lunch and a bit longer. We would just say, as long as you can publish what you do openly and share it, we're a bit agnostic on the way that you use tools. As long as you don't have vendor lock-in, that's the main thing. So not really a question for you, Luce, on that, but it was more of a philosophical question of market dynamics of.
Yeah, I can comment to a small degree on that. Only that I heard people mentioning Tableau and other things like that, and part of our RAP minimum viable product is that the tools used are open source. So we only allow, I guess, or support R or Python in this case. There are other ones, but those are the two we would like to drive towards. In practice, most of our teams use R anyway, so that's good. We do use SQL Server. We've got data stored in SQL Server, but we can read that in via R. We sometimes use things like OpenExcel or OpenXLS, I think it's called, to produce the Excel sheets. So we are trying to eliminate any other products, I guess, that people might be using, software that people might be using that isn't open source in our RAP pipeline.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Any more questions? We've got one more question, and then I think we're going to go get some lunch and you can get a cup of tea.
Hi, Adam Carruthers, NHS Digital. I'm a graduate trainee and I'm currently working in a team that's doing RAP. So my question is, how did you guys project manage your RAP pipeline? Because I think this is something that a lot of teams struggle with, like how to go about the development, more than just like things like unit testing. Like, how do you know the project is going well, for instance?
So that's a question, Luce, about how do you project manage your RAP delivery? Basically, how do you get it done? I think you mentioned a bit on your slides, but if you could share that with us, that'd be great.
So what we actually do, we have live coding sessions with the team, or at least with some members of the team who do the publication, who always produce this publication. So we have many publications across here. The example I gave was from one particular annual publication. We have some that are recurrent, might be annual, might be monthly, might be quarterly. We also have ad hoc ones, which we're going to support next as well. So we first assessed from the various teams, what state is your pipeline in? What does it look like? How many people have you got working on it? What tools do you use? How much code is there? How many manual steps do you currently have? And then we assessed in terms of what publications are kind of a good one to start with now, because they might have enough time to develop the RAP to use in the next publication. If that was due in a month, we're probably not going to make it. We put those back a bit. So we started with some ones that were going to be good to achieve and useful to achieve pretty soon. We then had conversations with that particular team and particularly see the skill level across the team and provide training. So we also do a lot of training ourselves. So we have a Git training set up. We do sometimes do bespoke team training with the teams if they have a particular skill that they're lacking. We have a number of resources in general for other training as well. So training comes first, getting people prepped. And then we do the guided coding session. So when I say we are the sort of the divisional RAP team at the moment, or until recently we were 2 people, so way understaffed, but we are expanding at the moment. We're 3 now, and we're going to be 4 soon, and that will help a lot. So we sit down, we do hybrid working, so everything is optionally remote. So we provide a Teams meeting, and we all sit down and we ask somebody to share their screen.
and show the code. And then we literally go, step one, right, we're going to make this package. How do we do that? We will tell you, but one of you is going to do the coding. So they actually sit there with their RStudio, and we say, okay, now we're going to design the package. It looks like this. That's what you do. These are the steps of code you use. And from there on, we go and develop the functions within the package, and we also guide them through that. So the good thing is they really develop their skills actively that way, and we can see the RAP teams, the publication team skills expand rapidly. And so we support them to the very point of having the package developed. And we also then, in this case, we've even got down to the point of unit testing, that we see that as quite an advanced RAP thing. That isn't the minimal viable product, but it's very helpful if we can do it for the bigger pipelines. And eventually we want to make sure that the whole pipeline is understood by the team. They have the capability to support it themselves, to develop it further. If any new members come in, that they can train them up as well. So we are going to remain a source that they can come to even when the pipeline is finished as such. That they can ask us for further training or further advice, any coding issues, we will be there as well. But they should really be trained up and have the understanding of their own pipeline, like they did before, but now it's a RAP, so it should actually be easier.
Fantastic, and I love that actually your way of project managing your projects or your packages is to not have any project management ways to do that. Is to do, you're measuring yourselves on working software, not on updates, reports, briefings, calls, all of the madness that goes with project management. So that's great. So basically the answer is measure yourselves on working software and do stuff. Start with a package, not a plan. Fantastic. Great, Luce. We're going to give you another round of applause. Thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully you can contribute to some of the documentation that we're putting together this afternoon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, so I'm going to just put the, we'll go back to the Open Data Saves Lives. We're going to stop for lunch. We will give ourselves another round of applause in a second because it is real life and we're actually working together. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a lunch break. Hopefully all those other questions that people came up with, I guess there's probably a 5-hour conversation about the philosophical use of commercial and open source software and where that stops and starts, which I'm sure we can all talk about for a long time. But hopefully you can all make a couple of new friends over lunch. And then what we're going to come back to is, in the Goldacre review, there's like 6 things that they said were really important. We could do all 6. We could just choose 2. So we'll get them on the wall, we'll get some post-its, and between us, we'll decide what are the most important things we're going to talk about this afternoon, what's most important to your organisation or to you personally, or is there something that would really help you immediately or maybe a little bit further in the future. We've got one Google document which we'll be all contributing to, and that will become the asset on the web that we take away from this that you'll be able to share afterwards, and we'll put it on the RAP event website, webpage. And the way that is, if we give ourselves sort of maybe till start about 20 past, 1:30, give ourselves an hour break, then have 2 hours of working on that with breaks for tea and coffee. But together, collectively, we'll work on those things. And what I'd like us all to focus on is okay, maybe review the subject or the heading that we're talking about, but then what are we going to do tomorrow, or what could we ask others to do tomorrow that would help us move at pace to get more things done with this. So we may be encouraging you to have 0 strategy papers or white papers, or but maybe have more working sessions, measuring working code, having common issues around ethics and governance that we can share, and once that question's been done, it's done for everyone and that gets updated, and there's loads of work we can do around sharing that. So if we give ourselves one last round of applause, come on. That brings the morning session to a close. Please feel free to grab the snacks, have a cup of tea, nip out for lunch, and then we'll come back together about 1:20 to then decide between us what we're going to work on this afternoon. So if anyone's been to an Unconference, it's like a little bit of a build on that sort of work where we decide what's important, and then we'll work on that this afternoon. So thanks very much.